How do I feed my chickens? How do I make sure my chickens don't die? How do I build chicken houses like this? How do I even raise my chickens? Guys, if there's anything that I've learned from 2019 when I started out my farm with just about $9,000 to my name, to currently where I'm earning over $120,000 every month from the farms, it is that the nutrition and the health of the chickens is of uttermost importance. I mean, when you do understand this, this is what's going to unlock you and ensure that you actually build out that life that you've always wanted to have as a farmer. Understanding the proper animal care on your farm is going to be the one key factor that's going to unlock everything for you to be able to, release yourself. I personally, I was a doctor when I started out, and I've been able to release myself. Right now, it's a Wednesday afternoon. I'm on the farm recording this video for you right here. I mean, that is called freedom. So for you to be able to, maybe build that dream house of yours, for you to be able to do that kind of thing you've always wanted, maybe to spend time with your family, maybe to travel all over the world, you're only going to be able to do that with a productive farm if you've figured out exactly how to raise an efficient, productive flock on your farm. So if you're serious about being a farmer, then you need to be serious about the general health and the productivity of your farm. You'll be surprised how many farmers outside there actually don't pay attention to this, and they end up with either dead bird, a farm that's not productive, they don't get enough revenue on the farm. In this video, I'm going to be tackling that. I'm going to be talking about animal care, and this is unlike any video that you've probably seen on my YouTube channel. This is going to be a very value-packed video. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about 4 fundamental things that you need to understand in order for you to master and raise healthy chickens. Very important, because if you don't do this, if you don't have the right knowledge, then you're going to be wasting your time and money, because starting a poultry farm requires a lot of investment. You're going to invest a lot of money and a lot of time. So if you don't have the correct knowledge starting out, then this is going to be time and money wasted, not time and money invested. You don't want to be like me earlier on when I was starting out my farm, where I lost about $14,000 with a flock. You had that right, yeah? I mean, I think it was my second flock on the farm. I lost about $14,000 on the farm just because I didn't raise the chickens well. That batch of chickens, it was about 1,000 birds, and I lost over 400 of them to a disease. It was a respiratory disease, then later on fall typhoid, and I just lost the entire flock. I mean, completely made no money out of the flock, and it could be you in this position. So ideally, you can say that I paid $14,000 for that mistake that I committed back then, yeah? So in this video, we're going to dive into these 4 fundamental principles, and the very first key fundamental principle is biosecurity. So basically speaking, biosecurity is the things that we do to prevent introduction of diseases on the farm from the outside. This is so key and important. From my personal experience and from visiting a lot of other farmers, because I deal with so many farmers, I've noticed that the #1 reason as to why people's chickens die is because of not understanding biosecurity and the principles, yeah? They don't understand how to prevent introduction of diseases on the farm, and a lot of people pay too much attention on trying to identify sick birds, trying to treat sick birds, but ideally all that would never have happened if you actually understood biosecurity very well and you understood how to prevent introduction of diseases on the farm. Now, I know this because personally it has happened to me in the past. You see, back in 2021, I had an experience on the farm where I had chickens. So I had this double-story chicken house where I had my chickens at the very top, and now because the lower space was empty and it wasn't being utilized, I let my dad, utilize it to place his chickens over there. And I think everything was going on well at the beginning until I think he lost his worker. So now my worker had to work both up in my chickens and on my dad's chickens at the bottom. And then unfortunately his birds got sick and we didn't know, and then the illness transferred to my birds, and just like that the birds started dying, completely dying. I mean, I lost so many birds. I mean, I believe that was like the initial cause of all these problems on the disease perspective that I got on the farm. So then what happened is that the birds just started coughing, they started getting swollen heads, then slowly by slowly, not feeding, and they started dying just like that. And I mean, I lost a lot of money. They reached the point of laying and I was still not getting any eggs at all. Eventually I had to make that very painful decision of having to let them go, which in the end I had to do. So I let them go. Then I spent about 2 months cleaning and disinfecting the house and clearing it out to bring in another batch of birds inside the chicken house. So certainly I did lose a lot of money. So if you want to, avoid that mistake, that costly mistake that I actually went through and lost 14,000 US dollars, then you need to make sure that you implement biosecurity. Very, very important. And so what are some of the things that you can do? First of all, don't let visitors come onto your farm. Yeah. For me, in this case, it was my dad who I let in to utilize the lower section, which ideally I should never have done. So don't let visitors come onto the farm. Yeah, very, very important. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's your uncle, your brother, your sister, your mother, your father. It should never, happen. Yeah? You need to make sure that you have very strict regulations about people coming over to the farm. I mean, just think about it. Yeah, if you're letting someone to come over to the farm, probably they want to visit, they want to learn anything about the chickens. Most probably, this is someone who is very interested in poultry farming. They want to learn from you. Unfortunately, that usually means that most probably they have visited other farms too. So this is actually the most likely person to introduce diseases on your farm. Yeah. So you want to make sure that you don't have visitors on the farm, unless if someone must come to the farm. And if they must come to the farm, maybe a vet or something like that, you need to make sure that you take their previous history. So they haven't visited any farms in the past 3 days, very important. So in the past 3 days, they haven't visited any farms, then you can allow them to come onto the farm, of course, with particular measures. If they have visited a farm, then you shouldn't let them be coming on the farm. The next biosecurity tip is always ensure that you visit your flocks from the youngest flock going towards the older flock. This is very important because the youngest flock is usually the one with the least immunity. The older flock has been vaccinated, it has got treatment and all these kinds of vaccinations. So ideally, it is protected. You could have organisms around in the flock, but they are not causing an issue because the birds have been vaccinated and they have immunity. If you take the same problem to the younger flock, which hasn't yet developed this immunity, it could turn out to be catastrophic. So you want to make sure that you visit the farm with the youngest flock first, moving towards the oldest flock. And if possible, ensure that each flock actually has its own workers. So minimize, workers having to move between the different flocks, because sometimes they could start with the youngest and go to the oldest, and then something bad happens to the youngest and then they go back. Yeah. So ideally this would be for the supervisor. Yeah. But for the people who work in the houses, you need to make sure that you minimize the whole idea of them mixing chicken houses. So let each flock have its own worker. But in addition to that, if we're talking about workers, then you need to make sure that the workers actually have different clothing. So the clothes that work outside the chicken house and outside the farm should never be the same clothes that work on the farm, because on the farm, you want to make sure that the clothes and the overalls, the gumboots, don't have interaction with the outside. That prevents introduction of diseases on the farm. And then the final tip is practicing the all-in, all-out system. This is very important. What this means is that all the birds on the farm should be introduced at the same time, and they should get out of the farm at the same time. Don't bring in birds incrementally. So you bring in one flock, and then 2 days later or 5 days later you bring in another group of birds, place them inside the same chicken house. That is very risky because, number one, some of the birds have received vaccinations and others haven't, and then number two, you risk introducing a bird which is sick, and then it just messes with the entire flock. So you want to make sure that you bring in all the birds at the same time. They're all of the same age, the same group, so placed in at the same time. And if you're taking them out, take them out at the same time. Yeah, that might be a little bit harder, but if you can, take them out at the same time, and this reduces the risk of introduction of the diseases on the farm. And then finally, a bonus tip is that when birds have been depleted from the farm, give the chicken house at least 2 weeks of being empty. So the birds have come out of the chicken house. Yeah, imagine this chicken house right here is empty. So the birds have come out, you open it up, clean it out, get out the manure. From the point of getting out the manure and having the chicken house clean, give it at least 2 weeks before you have another flock of chickens come in. That reduces, the microorganism burden on the chicken house and reduces the risk of passing on diseases from one flock to another flock. So as you can see, biosecurity is about keeping the flock and the farm as isolated as possible from, other types of people and birds and everything else. And some people laugh when they hear me talking about this because they feel like I'm being overcautious. But honestly speaking, I feel like I would rather be overcautious and have a healthy, beautiful flock than, have a terrible flock, one that's sickly, one that's not being productive, one that's not, giving you money. If you do implement those things, then you'll be on the more secure side of the equation. And if you do have other people also working on the farm, you need to make sure that you teach them these things, but not only teach them these things, but also teach them why they have to do these things. When they understand why they have to do these things, then most probably they're going to carry them out because they understand that if they don't do them, they'll get diseases on the farm. If you just tell them to do them, they might not implement them. But if they understand the value of why they have to implement these things, then most likely they are, likely to pull through with them and actually implement them. Yeah. So this is biosecurity. That was the first fundamental point, biosecurity. The second fundamental point is feeding. Yeah. Now, feeding and ensuring that your birds are well fed is such a key thing, because it influences, for example, how many eggs your chickens are going to be producing for you if your birds are layers, or how much in terms of size or in terms of weight gain that your birds are going to get if you're doing your birds for broilers. Too many people don't pay attention to this and they end up in trouble because they simply just go with what's available to them. They don't understand that the nutrient value of the food actually plays such a key role when it does come to the productivity and the great results of the farm. Very, very important. But the other thing that you need to pay attention to is that feed is about, for me on my farm, it's about 82.4% in terms of the costing on the farm, yeah, in terms of, the expense or the percentage of the expenses. What that means is that small, tiny changes in, the efficiency of feeding on the farm can actually lead to a great increment in profitability. So it is very, very important that you understand that, first of all, you shouldn't be spending too much on the feed, but then the feed that you're spending on is, very nutritious feed. So there's a balance between the cost and the nutrition bit of it, and a lot of people don't pay enough attention to this. So personally, I find that the most efficient way of doing this is by you formulating your own feed. Now, the advantage of this is that, first of all, it helps you ensure that you actually do have the right nutrients available to the birds, while also keeping the costs low because you're utilizing the available nutrients that you do have in your area. So this ensures that you have that perfect balance. Now, the best way, or the way that I do recommend that you do this, is by following a 5-step process for feed formulation. So the first step in this 5-step process is understand or identify the nutritional requirements of the chickens. Now, what you need to understand is that different types of chickens have different nutritional requirements. Broilers, for example, will have different nutritional requirements from layers, and layers, depending on the age and the level, we also have different requirements. For example, for layers, you could have chick starter, the grower mash, the developer mash, the prelay mash, layer 1, layer 2. I mean, this is just 6 different things for just layers alone. So all these have different nutritional requirements. So what are some of the nutrients that you do require for chickens? We'll start with carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are like the biggest component when it does come to feed, and this is what provides the energy available to the chickens. Now, what you need to understand is that chickens have a simple digestive system. They're not like, cows and goats, the so-called ruminants, where they have multiple stomachs which can digest, complex carbohydrates like grass, which you can see in the background over here. No, they are different. So they need simpler carbohydrates, things like starch, simple carbohydrates, and that's what they do require to be able to have the food digested and to provide the energy that's available for them. So there are very many different sources of, carbohydrates. You could have things like, maize, things like sorghum, things like millet, things like wheat. I mean, there's a lot of this. Now, the second thing is the proteins. Now, the proteins usually is the, I would say, most complicated, or I would say most expensive part of the nutritional requirement of the chickens, and it can be a bit complicated for a lot of people. These are very important in like muscle development and formation of the eggs, because the biggest percentage of the egg is protein. Muscle is literally protein. So these are also very important, and they can be got from different sources. We usually have plant sources and animal sources. So some of the plant sources are things like soya beans, things like sunflower cake, and then the animal sources, we have things like fish meal, blood meal. You need to be very attentive while putting some of these things, because there's a recommended maximum in which you have to include in the chicken feed. For example, if you put too much fish meal inside chicken feed, it could give you a fish odor in both the eggs and the chicken meat. So, there are particular levels where you should not go over and beyond while including some of these things. Yeah. Then the next one is fats. Yeah, fats are also very important because, first of all, they are very important in like holding the nutrients together, holding the food together so that it's not powdery. Also, they provide too much energy. They provide a lot of energy to ensure that, if the carbohydrates haven't given them enough energy, this can catch up. Yeah. Now, in addition to that, we also have like the vitamins, which are also very important in, the general body equilibrium. And then you'll have things like fiber, yeah, which we usually get from the maize bran, which are also important. And finally, but probably most importantly, water. Yeah, a lot of people neglect water when it does come to chickens. And if you don't give birds enough water, your production is completely going to fall down. So you need to make sure that the birds have good access to clean water on your farm. Then the next step is identifying the available ingredients in your area. So you understand the nutritional requirements. So what ingredients do have these nutritional requirements, yeah, these nutrients in your area. For example, you might be in an area where there's a lot of wheat, but they don't have maize, for example. So for you, wheat is cheaper and it's what you should be able to utilize. So you need to make sure that you understand the ingredients that are available in your area. In your area, for example, you might have too much fish and you can't get soybean at all, and for you it's a cheaper option because it's what available. So understand what you do have available to you, what you do have that you can utilize for your farm. Then the next step is to identify the nutritional content of these raw materials. Yeah, so how much calories, for example, are available in your maize, how much protein is available in the maize, how much fat is available in the maize. This is very important. Yeah, now you can easily do a quick Google search to find the details of how much of each of these is available, but you also need to be careful about this because, for example, maize in Uganda might have a different calorific content than maize in Sudan. Yeah, so you need to understand that you have to understand exactly this. Now, if you're not sure about it, you can always use the figures on the internet, but if you want to go further, you can actually do lab testing. So you take the samples to labs and they actually test to find the calorific content, of the maize, of the soybean, and each of these things. I mean, that might be an expensive option. So if it's too expensive for you, you can go with the figures that you can find on the internet, but that's a crucial step. And then step number 4 is understanding the individual cost of these raw materials. So this is quite simple for you to get. I mean, just move around in the market, the different suppliers and find the individual cost of these raw materials. And then finally, step number 5 is the feed formulation itself. So this is where you put together all the different ingredients and nutrients and balance the cost to ensure that you get the least feed formulation. Yeah, now it has to be able to meet the nutritional requirements of the birds, but also have as low a cost as possible. And I mean, one way that I personally recommend is simply using an Excel spreadsheet. This is a good way because, number one, it does have formulas. So I mean, you can just play around with the numbers really easily and come to like the perfect balance for you. That's number one. But number two, I mean, it's quite easy, it's quite quick, it gives you an excellent way of working around it, and it doesn't stress you. Now, if you don't want to develop it from scratch, I can share it with you, and I mean, just stick around. I'll later tell you how to get a hold of this Excel spreadsheet that I personally utilize on my farm and for a lot of my clients. But for now, let's move on to the third fundamental of animal care, which is actually brooding. Now, brooding is a key phase, and this is the first few weeks of life where we take care of the baby chicks to ensure that we attain, the desired weight depending on the targets. This is very important because it determines the performance of the birds, whether they will attain the weight that they're supposed to attain later on, or whether they'll produce the number of eggs that they're supposed to be producing. And if you do make a mistake here, this could be a mistake that could affect you much later on, and people don't even notice it. They only notice it much later on, 4-5 months later on, when the birds are not performing well, that the mistake was in brooding, and a lot of times you can't do so much about it. So it is very, very important and very crucial that you actually do your brooding very well. Now, brooding can ideally be divided into 2 phases. Yeah, the first one is pre-placement, and then the actual brooding. So pre-placement is when you prepare a chicken house for receiving and housing the birds. This is very important. I mean, you want to make sure that your birds are received into an environment which is comfortable and not stressing for them, because if the birds come and they're already stressed from day one, it's going to affect their development later on. So you want to make sure that it's perfect for them, and this is where biosecurity plays such a huge role, because the way the house has been prepared and the cleanliness of preparing the house plays such a huge role in ensuring that the birds grow up properly and they don't get sick throughout their cycle. So you need to ensure a proper biosecurity during pre-placement. Another thing that you need to consider here is the stocking density, and the stocking density is the number of birds that you place inside the area. So first of all, you want to make sure that you minimize or ensure that you don't have too many birds inside the area. If you have too many birds inside the area, there's going to be too much competition, and too much competition is not a good thing. The birds will grow up when they are not uniform. Some of them are feeding, others are not feeding. There's too much stress. You end up having piling, and a lot of the birds die, which generally is a bad thing. But also you want to make sure that you don't overspace the birds, because if you overspace the birds, then you're using a very huge house. It's not efficient, it's just too expensive and wasting space, for you. So you want to make sure that you get the correct stocking density. So if it is layers, the correct stocking density is going to be about 6 birds per square meter. If it's broilers, between 10 and 12 birds per square meter. But that's not the only factor when it does come to stocking density. You also want to consider the temperature of the area that you're in. If you're in an area that has high temperatures, over 30 degrees, 30 to 40 degrees, then your stocking density is going to have to be much lower, because generally the birds also are producing heat from their body, and you want to make sure that you have, correct environmental conditions for the birds themselves. Another one is the target weight of your birds. Yeah, so if your target weight is larger, for example, you want bigger birds, then you need to make sure that you give them a bit more space, so you put a few birds inside the house so that they grow to their maximum weight. If there are too many, then it becomes a problem. Yeah, you want to make sure that they have enough space to develop and reach that. Yeah, so once you've dealt with the stocking and the spacing inside, you also want to deal with the insulation. Insulation ensures that you have consistent temperature inside your chicken house. You don't want too much temperature variation inside your chicken house. If there's too much temperature variation inside your chicken house, then your birds won't perform well. Instead of performing, they're spending their time trying to cool down and warm themselves up. That's ideally a terrible thing. Yeah, so what are some of the ways you can have perfect temperatures inside your chicken house? You want to make sure that the house is well insulated, and a good percentage of that will depend on the roof. Yeah, so if you're in an area which is very hot, for example, your temperatures are over 40 degrees Celsius, then you want to make sure that there's an insulation material under the roof. Very important. Yeah, so that you have very little heat getting inside the chicken house and affecting the temperature variations inside your chicken house. So you want to make sure that your house is well insulated so that you have consistent temperatures that ensure that the birds can grow very well. Now, there's way more points about pre-placement for you to understand how to do your pre-placement properly. Way more than this, and later on I'm going to be pointing you to a resource where you can get more about this. But for now, let's go on to the actual brooding itself. So when it does come to the brooding, it is very important, yeah, that during this period the birds are raised properly. So brooding will typically vary depending on the type of the birds and the breed of birds. But typically for broilers we do about 2 weeks, and for the layers it can range anything between 3 and 5 weeks, yeah, depending on the temperatures that you're in, the area that you're in. It can range anything between 3 and 5 weeks. Now when it does come to brooding, first of all, it is important, like we said in pre-placement, that the birds arrive in a place which is pre-warmed and comfortable, because they are going to come after a long stressful journey of traveling. You want to make sure that they reach and the area is comfortable enough for them to settle in and be comfortable. Now the pre-warming can really vary. A lot of books and a lot of literature will tell you pre-warm the house for 24 hours, but personally from my experience I feel like that's too long and honestly quite expensive, because sources of heat are really expensive. So doing this for 24 hours I feel like is really wasteful, and from my experience I've seen that pre-warming the house for 2 to 3 hours before the birds arrive is actually quite good. It's sufficient enough, and personally that's what I do. And if you do it on your farm, you won't have any major consequences on your farm, and it saves you a lot of money. So that is the first thing. Now the next thing is that when the birds do arrive on the farm, a lot of times they're going to arrive when they are stressed and dehydrated because they have traveled. You want to make sure that you give them food and water as early as possible. Yeah, but the first thing is give them water. Yeah, because when the birds do arrive, like I've said, they've already been moving, they're most probably dehydrated, they're tired. Give them water that has glucose, that will give them a bit of energy and rehydrate them for about maybe 2, 3, maximum 4 hours, and then you can give them food, when they are comfortable enough. They've already gotten some energy, they've gotten something to drink. Now they are comfortable and they can be inside the chicken house. Now after that, the next thing is to ensure that you monitor them, to ensure that they're in a comfortable state. And an easy and quick way to do this is to weigh them. Yeah, so you weigh them on the day that they arrive, and then you continue monitoring to weigh them. So typically birds will lose a few grams, maybe 1 to 2 grams over the first 24 hours because of the dehydration, also because of the yolk sac coming down. So they will lose a bit of weight, but after that, after the first day, they should start picking up on weight, 2 grams. But if they lose 5, 10 grams on the first day, then you know that you're in a lot of trouble. Yeah, then you need to do something about it. Maybe there's not enough access to food, enough access to water. You need to look after those things. So you need to make sure that you're consistently monitoring them to ensure that you have the correct thing happening on the farm. And again, there's way more news to brooding than what I can cover in this short video. A lot of tricks, a lot of things that you can perform on your farm to ensure that you have the perfect brooding routine and the perfect results. Again, I'll share a bit more about it at the end of this video. But before that, let me take you to the 4th most important thing that you need to carry out on your farm to ensure perfect bird health, and that is abnormal bird behavior. Now you can tell a lot about the general health and performance of your birds simply by looking at the way that they behave, and if there is abnormal behavior inside the birds. Usually what happens is that birds adapt pretty well to small changes in stress, a bit of stressful things in the environment. They adapt really well. But then if there is something that's too stressing, or there is something that's happening that's outside what they can cope with, then they develop abnormal behavior, and this abnormal behavior can later on cause big problems in the flock. So the earlier you pick it out, the better. Actually, if you can avoid it, that would be perfect. But if it does come in, then the earlier you pick it out and prevent it, this ensures that you don't have bigger problems later on with your flock inside your chicken house. Yeah, and one of the most common abnormal behaviors that we usually see with chickens is aggression, which usually comes out and portrays itself as pecking. Now, a little bit of pecking inside flocks is natural, it's normal, it shouldn't be a problem. But when it becomes, aggressive and excessive, where birds literally pull out another's feather, the bird makes squeaking sounds, then that's abnormal, and that needs to be dealt with immediately. So usually the biggest causes of pecking are either viral or bacterial infections inside your chicken house, having spacing issues inside your house, poor ventilation where you have a buildup of toxic gases inside the chicken house, too much lighting inside the chicken house, and also problems with feeding. So either you're giving the birds food that's not appropriate with correct nutrients, or the food is not enough. Yeah. So now, being able to identify these causes and deal with them should be able to take away the abnormal bird behavior or prevent it generally. Yeah. Another common abnormal behavior that does happen in chickens is overcrowding. Overcrowding is when birds pile together, they crowd together, and they die. And this is usually caused by one of two things. Number one, curiosity, or number two, fear. Yeah. Now, sometimes crowding can be a normal behavior where naturally birds will come together when they're going to sleep, just a bit of crowding. But if it becomes too much, it will cause the birds to suffocate and die inside your chicken house, and it will cause you a very huge loss. Now, there are a few things that you can do to prevent overcrowding inside your chicken house. Number one is ensuring that you provide good ventilation inside your chicken house. Yeah? If the house is well ventilated, then you don't have areas where we have too much heat build up, where the birds will generally try to avoid and pile up in other areas, and then get together and they die. Another one is ensuring that you partition the chicken house, so you place mesh in different sections of the chicken house so that you don't have too many birds piling in one area. And in any case, if the birds pile against a particular surface, the place still has aeration because it is mesh, and the birds can still breathe and they don't die. Another one is providing even lighting inside the chicken house so that the birds are not too much attracted towards one area where there's light, where they could generally just come together and die. And then another way is to get the birds used to loud, stressful things from an earlier age. When they are used to this, then these things just won't stress them out later on. And if a random sound comes around, they won't just run to one area and try to pile, because generally they are used to loud things. Now, one way you can do this is by actually playing them music. Play them loud music, have speakers of music around the area. At first it will startle them, especially when they are younger, but as they grow up, they'll just get used to this sound and it just won't be a problem at all. If you're keeping them in a quiet place and then there's sudden random noises, it could cause problems and they all pile up in one area and die. Now, another abnormal behavior that I want to talk about is broodiness. Yeah, broodiness is the tendency of birds to sit on their own eggs, and try to hatch them. Now, generally or naturally speaking, birds naturally want to sit on their eggs because they want to sit on them and hatch them and get chicks outside. For you, you're a farmer, that's not what you want. You don't want birds to sit down because you want them to be laying eggs as often as possible. And when birds are sitting down on their eggs and they're trying to incubate them, they don't lay eggs during that period. And if the birds become many enough, then you're losing eggs. You're losing quite a number of eggs during that period. So you want to make sure that you avoid that from happening in your flock. Yeah. So what are the common causes of this happening in the farm? Usually one of two things. Number one, if there's too much heat stress inside the chicken house, and number two, if the birds are underweight. And usually the commonest cause of underweight birds is the feeding itself. Yeah. So how do you prevent this from happening? First of all, just make sure that you've understood the entire feed formulation thing, as I've talked about earlier on before. That way you have the correct feed and balanced feed for the chickens themselves. But number two, ensure that the chicken house is properly ventilated so that you don't have heat build up in particular areas, heat stress, and the birds start going inside the places and they become broody. Yeah, that is how you avoid it. Now, if you do notice on your farm that you have some birds and they have become broody, the best way to do it is just get the broody bird, place it inside a bucket of cold water, normal room temperature water, place it inside there for maybe 30 seconds to 1 minute so that it gets properly soaked, and then you isolate it, place it inside the chicken house that doesn't have litter at the bottom so that the bird is not comfortable enough. And after a few days, 2-3 days, that broodiness should be over and the birds should, be able to return inside their chicken house. Now, these are the 4 fundamental principles you want to implement on the farm to keep your birds healthy and productive so that you have consistent great profits. Now, I know it might sound trivial, and honestly it is, if you already implement them and you already know them and they're getting your great results. But for someone who doesn't, I mean, it's completely off. Now, all you need to do is to try implementing them on your farm, and you're going to see how effective and great in terms of results that they can actually bring on your farm. Yeah, and I mean, the interesting bit is that it doesn't require a biology or agriculture degree or any of these things. You don't need to have gone to school and studied a lot to do this. You just need to implement them. All you need is to have the discipline, the commitment to implement them on the farm, integrate them into, your farm routine, and then you're going to have the results that they have offered me, that they offer to every farmer who actually does implement them on the farm. And you see, while animal care is crucial, which is honestly why I made this video for you, it's completely useless if you don't understand how to, build a proper business plan, how to actually build a farm, how to market and sell the produce that you're producing on the farm, how to step away from the farm and the business. Because honestly, when you're starting a business, when you're starting a farm for yourself, you don't want to be creating another job for yourself. Yeah, for me, when I was starting a farm, I didn't want to create another job for myself. You're creating a farm to be able to have a business that you can step away from, have it run itself, so that you have the financial freedom and ideally the freedom to be able to step away, spend time with your family, spend time with your loved ones, maybe retire yourself, retire your parents, be able to spend time doing the things that you want to do while you have other people running the farm and doing the actual work that's involved in actually running the farm. Honestly, I'm personally very grateful that I've been able to accomplish this for myself. You see, I started a while back, like I said earlier on, with about just $9,000. Meanwhile, this was $9,000 like put up together, but initially it was just $3,000 that I saved up to start, and currently I'm able to make over 120K every month from the farm. It has given me this freedom. But I didn't start that way. It was complicated. I went through a lot of trial and error. It was a lot of pain having to go there. I lost a lot of money. And if only I had knowledge at that particular point to avoid this pain and struggle and the money that I lost, then I would certainly have been much further along this journey. Now, because of that, I have decided to, give you guys a tool, provide a pillar of support to ensure that you guys can certainly do it much quicker and faster than personally what I did, when I was starting out, because for me it was a very, very huge struggle with a lot of money lost. I wish I personally had this pillar of support when I was starting out earlier on. You see, initially I wanted to start a physical training school where I can get you guys come over to the farm and do physical in-person trainings. But after a lot of thought and understanding a lot of things like, for example, a lot of you people actually not in Africa, a lot of you people are in Europe, in the US, in Australia. That means that first of all, it would have been very complicated and very expensive to set up, to have you people all come around with your timetables and schedules. It would have been really expensive and time consuming to be able to coordinate everything together. And so because of continuous thought and thinking about this, I decided to do the online version of it, and that is the Farm Up Academy Pro. Yeah, so it's basically an online education program where you get access to all the teachings that you would have gotten physically from me anyway. Yeah, so with the Farm Up Academy, I guide you and train you on how to start and run and build a profitable poultry farm that can make you anything between $5,000 to $15,000 every month within just 21 weeks. So here is what you get when you join. First, our exclusive in-depth farm video course. Here you get 4 course modules where you get to understand everything from preparing to start a farm, developing a business plan, understanding how to do sales and marketing, understanding how to do the actual day-to-day running on the farm, and how to step away from the business. The things that personally I wish I had known earlier, but ensure that you run the farm perfectly each and every day. Secondly, you'll also get access to my personal systems, documentations, and trainings. Now, these are things that have taken me, months and years to develop. I've developed them and practiced them on my farm, and they work perfectly. Things like, the feed formulation tool, things like the biosecurity checklist, the day-to-day farm management checklist that the guys utilize on the farm to ensure that, no activities go wrong. These are things that have taken me a very long time to develop, and for you just literally get them, plug them into your farm, and they are working just like that. You'll also have access to monthly group coaching calls where you can hop on with me and ask me any questions that you're probably having with your farm or developing your farm, so that we can get them answered and we just get them solved and out of the way. And in addition to that, number 4, you also have access to a farm up community where you have, connecting with other farmers. If you do have any questions, you can learn from each other, ask each other, so that, you just learn and get the support from other farmers that you do need to develop on your farm. And I'm also working on, getting exclusive discounts on, things like farm equipment, supplies, things that you can literally utilize on your farm. And that's what's included in the Farm Up Academy Pro package. Now, I made this to provide a cost-effective option for people to join the Farm Up Academy. As some of you might already know, earlier on this year, probably around July, I started the Farm Up Academy, and the only way for you to join the Farm Up Academy, the only available package was $4,800. But for a lot of people, that was, too expensive, honestly. So it got me thinking, how can I make it way more accessible for people to join the Farm Up Academy while also maintaining, the value of the academy and, the quality of what is inside. So after a lot of thought, I came up with the Farm Up Pro package, which will give you all the support and knowledge you need to build a wildly profitable $5,000 to $15,000 per month from your farm within just 21 weeks or less if you actually take action right now. Now, if this video is still online and you're still watching it, it means then that you do have access to our early bird discount, which ensures that you get access to our early bird pricing discount. Now, you won't be getting the Farm Up Academy for our full price of $1,497. You'll be getting it at the early bird discount of $997 only. Now, can you imagine that? For less than $1,000, you get all the knowledge and the skills that you do require to start and build a profitable farming business that could make you thousands of money. I mean, thousands and thousands of money, just like it did for myself. Just like it did for some of my clients. For example, Jeremiah. Jeremiah is one of my clients who had, layers. Once I started working with him, we made a few changes to his farm, and it saved him $21,000 in profit in just 1 year. 21,000 in US dollars in just 1 year, just because we made a few changes in terms of knowledge that he learned. Peter, on the other side, was having problems, with birds dying each and every month on his farm. We made a few changes on his farm, and that completely, flipped around, and his life was completely flipped around. And I'm 100% confident that you love the Farm Up Academy Pro, that I'm honestly willing to make a guarantee. Now, the guarantee is that if you do join the Farm Up Academy and for any reason you feel like you didn't get value from it, or you've probably changed your mind about farming, within the first 30 days, you can just send me a message and let me know that, you'd love to opt out, and you'll get a 100% refund on your joining fee for the Farm Up Academy. Now, like I've said earlier on, $997 is actually our early bird discount. And I'm honestly not so sure about, how long I'm going to keep this up. I don't know. It could be until tomorrow, or maybe for 1 week. I'm honestly not certain. It will depend on how I feel. But if you're watching this video right now, then certainly you still do have access to our early bird discount. So if this is you and you want to grow, then click on a link that you'll find below written on, I want to grow. You'll be taken to a secure checkout page where you'll just fill in your information right there, and then you'll immediately get access to the Farm Up Academy Pro dashboard. My friend, I want to tell you that this is a life-changing moment for you. I mean, if you don't mind sitting around and watching other people's lives changed, knowing that you could actually, flip your life and have it change, then just close the video and get done with it. But if you actually want to have your life impacted and flip your life around, see the freedom that comes from, financial freedom and being able to literally dictate your own life, then you're the kind of person, just click on, the link right below, I want to grow, and then I'll see you inside the Farm Up Academy. I'll see you on the group coaching call once you've accessed the Farm Up Academy. Catch you very soon.